For most English speakers, we have a nebulous concept of buckwheat at best. In my youth, it conjured images of some sort of gruel that was used to sustain life on the frontier. You know, food for cowboys and western settlers in the 1800s. And for most Americans, the term buckwheat isn't even connected to the dish, but to a timeless character that was first introduced in the Little Rascals in 1935, and then later lampooned by Eddie Murphy in the early 80s, and then reimagined in a terribly acted 1994 film.
It's buckwheat!
Buckwheat? Yes.
Buckwheat jeans.
Okay.
In Eastern Europe, buckwheat is still incredibly popular, and in France it's used in savory crepes, and the soba in soba noodles is actually Japanese for buckwheat. But in the Anglosphere, buckwheat has absolutely fallen out of cultural memory. So what could have possibly made this drought-resistant, high-yield, spoil-proof, gluten-free, nutrient-rich, Great Depression staple absolutely vanish from the culinary zeitgeist, relegated now to nothing more than low-end livestock feed? What could have possibly replaced buckwheat?
Corn?
Oh yeah, corn.
Corn.
Oh,
Yeah,
corn.
you
Oh,
betcha.
corn, absolutely.
Corn.
Yeah, absolutely.
Corn.
King corn, and wheat and beans to a lesser extent, totally usurped buckwheat. However, buckwheat is making a bit of a comeback. Marketed by corporate soulless ghouls and sold to new age yuppies as some sort of superfood, you can see buckwheat in overpriced grocery stores. However, buckwheat is a very acquired taste, especially if you don't know how to cook it. And to the virgin palate, the taste of buckwheat can be a little surprising.
20-year-old single malt scotch.
So boil up some water and get ready to pay way too much money for pig feed, because today I'm going to teach you guys how to make buckwheat and how to make it delicious. For those who grew up in a former Soviet country, this odd seed posturing as a grain is a staple. In many cases, it is the first food they eat after mother's milk, and is the last food they eat if they're lucky enough to make it to ripe old age. A literal cradle-to-the-grave culinary staple. However, the fact it has been so popular and so vital for so many for so long means it has seen almost zero evolution. For those who have never tried buckwheat, it has an extremely odd taste and a unique texture. The smell and flavor can be reminiscent of wet mulch. The texture can be very odd, especially since some prefer to overcook it into a soft, textureless porridge. So the challenge here is to make a dish that respects both hardline buckwheat lovers who have eaten it the exact same way their whole lives, while making it a bit more palatable to newcomers. During my experimentation, there were a few dishes I thought could be interesting. A buckwheat burrito, buckwheat pancakes, I even thought about buckwheat risotto. But I discovered a salad of sorts that uses hot rice as its base and is dressed with pickled veggies, meat, sauces, and egg. I think this is the best way to appease both the diehard traditionalists and the brave buckwheat newbies. So for that perfect Goldilocks dish, we're going to Korea to make a modified version of bibimbap.
Baby bottle pop.
While doing research for this video, I came across several references to buckwheat as kasha. Buckwheat is not kasha. The correct term for buckwheat is Grechka. Kasha means porridge. So while buckwheat can become a type of kasha, much like oatmeal or grits, the correct term is Grechka. Calling raw, uncooked buckwheat kasha is akin to calling a freshly caught, unprocessed Alaskan pollock a McDonald's Filet-O-Fish sandwich. To make Grechka, first bring water to a boil. The ratio of water to buckwheat will be roughly 2-1. This might be a bit soupier than some like, especially if you won't boil it till it's super soft. For chewier buckwheat, use about 10% less water. Once the water's boiling, add 2 heaping teaspoons of salt and your Grechka. Stir frequently. Now you can prepare your Grechka enhancers. Break down pork belly and onion. The fat and onion will add much needed flavor and depth. If you're eating Grechka for more health-centric reasons, or you're deeply masochistic, you can skip this step, or just add a small amount of butter to the buckwheat once cooked. Fry the pork and onions in a pan to make cracklings, just like we did for the banosh video. Now your kitchen should have the haunting aroma of damp tree bark as the Grechka is nearly cooked. The Grechka should be ready when it blooms into a plump-looking grain that has a slightly toothy texture when you eat it. If you are making this for the elderly or the newborn, boil it till it explodes, as you want to make something much softer in texture, closer to a traditional porridge. You can eat the buckwheat now, as is, as a healthy, straightforward complex carb, or use it as a filler in other dishes, or as a side to the protein of your choice. When your cracklins are ready, you can pour your Grechka directly into the pan and mix. The Grechka will absorb the fat and mix with the meat. At this point, you could stop and still have a totally acceptable version of traditional Eastern European, yet slightly less healthy, szklarki I Grechka. Now, the Grechka has completed its transformation into kasha. But we're going to take things just a little bit further. Now that we have our much improved, pork-infused hot kasha, we are going to use it as a canvas to make our bibimbap. Pickled and fresh veggies, meats, hot sauces, greens, a super runny egg would all be incredible here. Unfortunately, I did not have gochujang, but if someone wants to try it with this dish, please let me know how it comes out. The additional ingredients really help to temper the potentially off-putting taste of buckwheat, while complementing its unique flavors and textures to make a punchier foundation for bibimbap. It really helps to elevate the dish as a whole. Basically, treat the dish as a base for a rice bowl and add whatever your heart tells you to. Then just mix thoroughly and eat. If you are a buckwheat veteran and have loved this dish your whole life, this will be an interesting new take on a classic. If you are a buckwheat beginner, this will certainly help ease you into what could otherwise be a shocking or off-putting gastronomic experience. Just make sure that you skip the hippy-dippy grocery store chains charging an arm and a leg and find an Eastern European shop to get this stuff super cheap. Have you tried buckwheat already? Do you remember your first time? Let me know in the comments below. Until next time.
Not that hard.
Now you've shifted all the buckwheat around.
Buckwheat? That's your problem.